everyone, welcome to devlog number 26. I'm really happy to show you that I now have a single macro material for the terrain tiles to paint parallax shaded mapping directly in the game, and I've also developed an add-on which I'll be sharing with my patrons so that they can also use this as well. So first, thank you to all my patrons. Without you this would not be happening. And of course my patrons will have access to this parallax shading technique, and I will be making this available in my Discord as well. So let's jump right in. But first, everyone's name's up in lights. Thank you to all the patrons. And now let's jump right in. Okay, so here's the cool thing. The cool thing is that Parallax is a magical tool that you can use to create a lot of detail without using a lot of geometry. If you're restrained by memory constraints like I am and processing for the Blender game engine, what you can do is you can use Parallax to create more detail in your game without adding more geometry. So here you can see a parallax map, which is mixing a clover-filled grass texture here, which is, I guess you'd call it like a little field of clovers. It's also animated. The clovers are animated, and from a distance it looks very impressive. And then if you look at this rock here, you can see the grass is mixing with these pebbles. And if I start painting on it, I can actually live start mixing this material. But, and this is the really cool part, without actually having to without even having to change the material, by going to the materials tab and selecting a new material, I can actually just go to the texture UV ID here, and I can actually choose a new material directly from the UV map editor here. And now I'm mixing the grass with, I guess, these rocks. And you can see it has the appearance of depth, but it's just a simple parallax map. So this is a really efficient way to make a shader for a game. So you don't have to use a lot of memory, but you can use a very small amount of memory, but get a lot of impact, and at the same time make it easier for the designer to work on a design level. And now I'm going to show what's happening under the hood. So I'm not going to get into too much detail because it's a little complicated. To be honest, it's very complicated, but my patrons, if they have any questions, are welcome to ask, and you know, look at the file and break it apart and see how it works themselves. But I'm going to give a quick overview of it, and then I'm going to show the add-on and how it works and why I've done it this way. So the first reason is I've done it this way because if you have a single material, you need to use texture, you need to use UV IDs to get the right UV coordinates. So when you raycast in the Upliner game engine downward, when you raycast downward, you get the correct coordinates for the UV map, so you can choose the right sound to play. And that basically means that when you're walking on top of a bunch of different materials in the game engine, you can just detect the material. So if you walk on wood, it'll make a wood sound. If you walk on water, it'll make a splashing sound. You get the idea. But when you're using a single material, what do you use to detect the material that the player is walking on top of? And I've chosen UV maps, and that's what these texture IDs are. So if you actually just jump over really quick into the game files themselves and you look at the sound effects, the first sound effect here, which is the sound of the player running across grass, is not the name grass, but it's actually the name of the coordinates on the UV map, negative 0.875 and 0.6250. Those are the two floats that determine the positioning for this UV texture. And you can see it's just a single point. And that means that these UV offsets right here, it's selecting texture ID, and that's getting shipped right in here into this this node group in the shaders, and it's causing the atlas, the texture atlas, that has multiple textures, and you can see that right here. So all the textures that are repeating are on a single texture, but then there's vector math using modulo math to determine which blocked section you're using. So you could be using this one or this one or this one or this one. So the texture IDs determine which block you're currently on. Now, designing this way by manually moving these UVs like this would be very cumbersome. But there's another problem. By moving around like this, you need to make sure that the coordinates, you can see over here, the UV vertex coordinates, you'd have to perfectly get the coordinates every time so that you always had a predictable location, so that the sound handler in the game's code would know exactly what sound to play. And that's very inconvenient to design with. You could basically never design. It would take you weeks to design a single chunk of terrain in the game engine because it would be so inconvenient. So I made an add-on that will make this convenient, and it's very simple. And I've called it UV Paint, for lack of a better name, because you're not really painting with UV, but you're determining texture ID. So it's maybe I called it Texture Atlas. No. Oh, that's a new add-on. Huh, I didn't even know that existed. It's called UV Map Paint. So essentially, you're kind of painting as though it were a UV map. And what this does is it just adds these two buttons. So it's top up, top down, bottom up, and bop down. And that's for the top layer and the bottom layer. So if you want to mix two materials at once, you can do that. And if I select this, you can see it's just going to cycle through the material that I use. Now this fuchsia color, these are blocks that I haven't filled in yet. So not only is this a very efficient way to get new materials and switch them very quickly without having to even select a new material in the material index here, you can cycle through your materials quickly and efficiently to choose which terrain you're going to paint with. And it's obviously much better for performance. So I've switched to this texture. Maybe I want it to come out a little bit more to the edge over here. So like this. Yeah, here we go. There you go. So I don't know. I made this, and this is the material I've painted in here. And if I want to select different things, I have these rocks I can choose from, or this sand, which is pretty nice. And this gives you a lot of creative freedom. What's happening under the hood here when I click top up or top down, it's cycling through these things. So if I go here, let's just click this number here, and let's go select this very spooky looking material. I call them scary rocks. They look like spooky, scary rocks. If you look over here, and I jump to texture ID, it has now moved the UVs perfectly to this coordinate right here. You can see down here in the bottom left-hand side of my screen. So this is the correct coordinate system for these to be called for the sound effect. And what this ultimately means is now that I have this shader, you can mix it with the grass, which is, by the way, its own separate shader, so technically it's 1.2 shaders. Or I can apply it to this, which is now the top and the bottom. And what this is doing is it's mixing texture ID 1, which is down here, the top layer, and then texture ID 2, which is the bottom layer. And this allows me to determine or choose which material is getting mixed with which live while I'm designing it. So instead of having to switch back and forth, I can go right here, and now I can also assign these shortcuts if I want to. And I can cycle through the different materials that are getting mixed together. So here I'm actually mixing two very similar materials. This is the same material being mixed twice. There's no difference here. Really, oh actually no, there's a difference. You can actually see it's the stones. So let's see if I can match those up here. Let's try and get stones as well. There we go. So now they're both mixing together. So really all you're doing is you're changing the height of this. But if we change it to a new material and we just cycle through, oops, now I've lost the other one. There we go. There we are. So now I can choose any material that I want to mix with these. So I can mix these rocks here with, say, my scary rocks that I just chose before. Let's find those ones. Also, it's worth noting that you can cycle through these materials much faster. It's a very efficient way to do things. And now I'm mixing two types of rocks, and you can see they're effectively masking each other off, and they have depth to it. And this is essentially the trick. So the add-on is a little bit sketchy, and it's not like what I would call a full suited. It's not a full-fledged design suite or something like that. This allows me to work within this workflow to effectively make things fast. So I'm not stuck doing one thing forever, which is just scaling down and then moving UVs to the correct coordinates. This is all handled for me. And it allows you to now just paint directly and quickly on your terrain maps very fast and create game worlds. So here you can see I'm making water mix with the material. And here you can also see, as I go down, the water actually mixes with the parallax material. So I can do all sorts of fun things like changing the height, moving things around, and then when the player begins to play like this and they're running around, it will the terrain will be playing the correct sound effect. And because this is the Upblender game engine, and it's pretty awesome, I can simply save it once, and now I can jump right over and I can actually launch my game. So I'm also going to show a double feature here, I suppose. I'll be showing some of the game footage. And this is the preloader. Hit me back in the comments if you guys have ever seen a better preloader out there. Making preloaders in the Upblender game engine is rather difficult, but this is what I have. And what this is doing is it's loading first the open world and the standard menu. And if I press M just for quick start, my patrons will also have access to this. They'll be able to do a quick start, which starts the game up quickly here and allows me to now run through the open world. So you can see the parallax right now is very extreme, and that's because I've exaggerated it for this tutorial. And I'm not sure if it's actually recording the sound right now, but when I walk on these rocks, it should be playing a rock sound. And of course, there is the monster in the game. She looks as though she's lurking towards me rather slowly. You know what? I might as well stab her while we're here just to get a little game footage in here. So you can hit her in the head with a cleaver, and then she's very unhappy. And anyway, so and she's gonna catch me. Oh, she got me, and now she killed me. So this has been, I guess, devlog number 26, where I'm showing the add-on for terrain painting, and I also died. I'm also dying very often in the game now because I'm not very good at my own game. Anyway, thank you all so very much for watching, and I'll end the video here.